Dear Professor Himmel, thank you very much for your kind words of introduction. The former ECB President Jean-Claude Trichet tended to say at those occasions, my mother would have been, or my father would have been proud, my mother would have even believed you. So thanks a lot for that. President Kaplan, dear graduates, dear parents, family and friends, dear faculty, ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor and a great pleasure for me to be part of this very special day for you, despite the sad circumstances. And let me just assure you that my thoughts are with the family and friends of your fellow student. Regarding the choice of the venue for this occasion, I could hardly imagine any better location to celebrate your academic accomplishments. The Elfi is a true modern icon for Hamburg, built on the Kai-Speicher that used to store cacao, tobacco, and tea right below this magnificent concert hall we are currently in. So, 150 years ago, this place was the location of a gigantic warehouse and a storage space for goods with an impressive 19,000 square meters capacity. Together with the historic Speicherstadt and the modern container harbors, it is a symbol for Hamburg as a gateway to the world, as well as its continued relevance in global supply chain logistics. So it's only logical that your alma mater is also situated in the HafenCity. Hats off to the vision and efforts of the Kühne Foundation and its benefactors Klaus Michael and Christine Kühne. To me, the Kühnes are an outstanding example of how private patronage benefits culture, innovation, and research, as well as future leadership. We would not be here today without them. Ladies and gentlemen, the growing global interconnectedness has led many authors to talk about a shrinking world. Travel has become faster, telecommunication cheaper, and goods are shipped from every corner of the world directly to our homes. Logistics, transport, and supply chain management constitute the power grid of international trade, and they contribute to its efficient organization, minimizing resource use and costs. I'm sure you know much more about the intricate details of supply chain management than I do, so let me focus on some overarching trends which may also shape your future. Let me start with some remarks on the current state of globalization. The importance of smooth, frictionless logistics for our global welfare can be felt once frictions arise. After decades of rising globalization, in recent years, we have experienced frictions and shocks to global trade, for example, when China closed its ports during the pandemic. Or remember the disruptive effect of just one shipping incident in the Suez Channel on global trade routes. The blockage by the 400-meter-long Ever Given in March 2021 lasted for 6 days and resulted in the obstruction of $9 billion worth of goods each day. Then, we all felt the huge impact of the Russian war against Ukraine, and recently, repercussions of the Middle Eastern conflict with attacks on cargo ships by Houthi rebels in the Red Sea have been at the fore. Extreme weather events and climate changes are also becoming a challenge. For example, Port Watch, an IMF venture with Oxford University, monitoring 99% of maritime trade flows by satellite, noted recently that shipping restrictions in the Panama Canal were imposed due to drought and tropical cyclones. These increased risks put a burden on trade and are reflected in rising freight costs. For example, the cost of shipping a container from Asia to Europe recently increased sixfold in only 2 quarters. But logistics also helps us to adapt to these crises and become more resilient. We have heard about that already. The food crisis expected after the Russian invasion could be contained in part because of new suppliers from around the world. And in a similar vein, an energy crisis was avoided by building new LNG terminals in Germany and sourcing new energy suppliers, and this also represents an impressive logistical effort. On a more fundamental level, the systemic competition between the US and China and the growing nationalism in some countries work against globalization as we know it. In particular, global trade is being dramatically reshaped by geopolitical fragmentation. Policymakers around the globe rediscover industrial policy, as well as state interventions, and resort to mercantilist ideas such as tariffs and subsidies in an effort to boost their local industries. For example, the percentage of Chinese exports subject to US tariffs rose from 0 in 2018 to around 60 in 2020 and vice versa. At the same time, tariff rates between both countries increased from single digits to around 20% today. As global powers embrace such protective measures, more trade will take place between like-minded partners. Preliminary studies show such a tendency towards higher trade volumes between geopolitical aligned countries since 2018. Regionalization and friendshoring are therefore becoming increasingly relevant issues to watch, even though more time will be needed to assess the significance of these trends. As a case in point, the US has recently become Germany's #1 trading partner, reflecting these strategic adjustments. The transatlantic relationship is strong, even in times of stress, and I'm cautiously confident that this will still be the case after the US election. There is an understandable reasoning behind the realignment of global supply chains. Diversification is a reaction to the experience of supply chain disruptions, and friendshoring is mostly a reaction to rising political risks in some countries and meant to reduce dependencies from authoritarian regimes that might even use their exports as political leverage. But also, policy priorities like the fight against climate change affect trade relations. Against this background, some already talk about the end of globalization. But we must not forget that trade and specialization is not a zero-sum game, but a foundation of our welfare, especially when regionalization means that trade partners no longer reduce trade barriers and fragmentation between themselves, but instead put an emphasis on joining forces to introduce new trade barriers against the rest of the world. There is reason to worry. Another notable shift in globalization is the increasing relevance of trade and services. US global trade and services rose steadily over the past decade, and it now accounts for 34% of the total value of the EU's overall trade volume, up from 27% in 2013. The freight container is still the symbol for global trade and logistics, but data cables and satellites increasingly characterize globalization as well. You see, there's lots of disruptive change and also uncertainty about how these developments will play out at the end. Therefore, the ability to deal with these structural changes, or more generally, the capacity to make robust business decisions under uncertainty, is key. In principle, this is nothing new. It describes the basic challenge of entrepreneurship and business management. But I would venture that uncertainty is particularly pronounced these days, and it will also remain high. It might be even different by nature, as some of the recent events, like the pandemic or the Russian war against Ukraine, are part of a so-called radical uncertainty that cannot even be described by means of a probability distribution. But with change, there always comes opportunity. As the Chinese saying goes, when the winds of change blow, some people build walls, others build windmills. Or you could set your sails accordingly to reach your next destination. Coming back to the hypothesis of the end of globalization, my advice is to be skeptical when something is coined the end of an era. Around the time when the Berlin Wall fell in 1989, and I had recently studying economics in Aix-en-Provence, Francis Fukuyama received a lot of attention with his book about the end of history, describing the victory of liberal democracy and the market system. And not so long ago, many academics and market experts were talking about the end of inflation. Looking at developments over the last few years, it's clear that both calls were a little premature. And so, we often make the experience that something that may feel like the end of an era is only the beginning of a new chapter. Globalization is constantly evolving, but it still has the potential to further contribute to poverty reduction, technological innovation, and economic development. But it's not my intention to dive any deeper by giving you another lengthy lecture, of which I guess you have endured many over the past years. Today we're here to celebrate that you have realized your ambition and reached the goal you set yourselves when you began your studies at KLU. This also implies that you turn the page to a new chapter in your lives, are thinking about or are already preparing your next steps. Some of you might feel a little nervous about doing during a time of challenges and a time of uncertainty. And you will ask yourselves how to navigate your career in such uncertain waters. However, with your degree, and I would add more importantly, your knowledge and training, you have laid the foundation to master your future and to cope with various headwinds ahead. In a manner of speaking, you have now successfully accomplished your sailing license, which allows you to lift your anchor, set your sails, and steer your vessel to your chosen next destination. To be quite frank, this is actually my first speech of this kind at a graduation ceremony, and I confess I've held many speeches over the years, mainly on economic and monetary policy, and I didn't want to bother you too much with that. But I asked myself, what kind of advice could I give to you for your own personal journey when navigating the future? First and foremost, my advice would be to always try to do what brings you joy. Performing tasks with genuine interest and passion will lead to fulfillment also in professional life, but will also allow you to perform at your best. This is an important ingredient for your success. And passion is closely interconnected to my second piece of advice, the importance of standing in for your own fundamental values. During the global financial crisis, central bankers, bank CEOs, and political leaders were on uncharted territory and faced formerly unknown risks. What followed were intense discussions on where the ship should be steered to remain in the picture. At this time, a compass to navigate through these times was of utmost importance. To me, the clear focus of monetary policy on price stability and the clear separation of monetary from fiscal policy was such a compass. And even though it was not always easy, I fought for those principles even against strong headwinds. Thirdly, it's always wise to not restrict your field of vision too much, but remain open-minded to opportunities at the horizon. Looking back at my own professional career, it may now seem like a written-out, planned step-by-step route. But let me assure you, it never is, and it was not in my case. When I took up my first postdoctoral position at the IMF in Washington, I would neither have envisioned one day becoming Angela Merkel's advisor or later president of Deutsche Bundesbank. And it would not have worked if I had wanted to stay in my comfort zone, not willing to accept jobs in a completely new environment or which I was not sure to master initially. When I switched from the world of central banks to the Federal Chancellery in Berlin, the political world, I arrived in a completely different environment, but a total fascinating working environment, and kept learning until the very last day. So ideally, each job ahead of you brings you new experiences and valuable insights which will lead you to new opportunities. Lastly, Keep an open and investigative mind and stay curious about the world you live in. With your studies here at KLU, you have made a quintessential first step. You now have the tools that will help you along your path. It may sound heretic on a day like this, but there is a world beyond logistics and your future job. Cultivate your other interests as well, be it sports, arts, or politics. They help you keep your balance, and more often than not, at least according to my experience, they will help you get a fresh perspective on your challenges at work. For me, just to give you a slight personal insight, cycling ensures this balance on ideal routes. You can reach an always meditative feeling with the repetitive movement of your legs and the floating attention to your surroundings, but I guess there are multiple other ways to achieve the same effect. So let me now come back to the logistics behind achieving your degree. We must not forget the role that the support and effort of your families and friends played in the success. So let us give a special applause for your support networks as well as to your academic teachers. And congratulations to you as you succeeded in your studies driven by teamwork, personal effort, and endurance. As I'm chairing the Hayek Foundation's board, let me end with a quote from Friedrich August von Hayek, a famous liberal economist, on the value and the price of freedom, which relates well to your situation after leaving your alma mater. And I quote, "There is the possibility of failure, the uncertainty, the general unpredictability of life, which thus becomes exciting and interesting. And that only through this enormous opportunities can arise." I do wish every single one of you to make the best of your opportunities. Enjoy this wonderful day for you. And thanks again for letting me share this special occasion with you today. Thanks a lot.